So welcome everybody. Hopefully the sounds are going to be a lot better than they were last time. We're going to start coding in just a second. I wanted to start with a couple of things, but I did have a question in the chat I thought I'd answer. Would I ever consider Electron and React for creating a desktop app? A lot of people do. It's a pretty common combination, honestly. I don't do React, so obviously I wouldn't consider it. Electron or one of the other shells are great for, for writing your apps in JavaScript and being able to create them as a desktop app. So I certainly condone that. I just can't speak to React that much. But thanks for asking, Lucky13, however you spell it. So let's go over to the coding. And let me see if I can get the whole window in here. We're still experimenting with everything. There we go. Let me do the same for my browser window, just so we can get it all on the screen. A little weird to be working in these smaller windows, but everything should work. And so before we get started with the view, I wanted to take a little bit more of a systematic approach. And so I'm going to create a new file in here, and I'm just going to call it punchlist.md. Just a quick way for us to, oops, I hate when I do that. If you haven't used this advanced new file in Visual Studio, I super recommend it. First ask you for where you want it, and then you can go ahead and just say punchlist.md. And I just want to start by having somewhat of a plan. So things to get done. This should probably be in issues in GitHub, but let's do it kind of quickly here, just so we have a list of the things that we're going to accomplish over these next few weeks. We got the project started last week, so we can kind of say that that's been done. And today we're going to set up our state management. That way we can store data and share it between views, because we're also going to need to set up routing after that. Soon after that, we need to figure out how we're going to save this information for you. So we'll probably need to integrate with ASP.NET Core and write an API to work with it, add authentication, and hopefully that'll be most of it. I'm sure we'll come back to this and add things as we realize we have more things, but it's a good place for us to start, just having a quick punch list. I like knowing where I'm going. And so let's start with this idea. We're going to be here in source. Just a reminder to anyone that's new, we have this simple app called My Bookcase, and I have a bunch of books in it. And we want to be able to allow people to pick the books and add them to their own library of books they've read or books they want to read, whatever sort of list they want of books. And so if you haven't looked at this, we do have this on a GitHub repository at SeanWildermuth/Wilderstream. Let me just actually open that up just so you can see it for those of you who want to follow along week after week. Wilderstream. So every week I'll be uploading, I'll be pushing the latest changes here, so if you want to follow along, we're all good. So let's go back to the code, and for me the next idea would be to think about state management, because right now what we developed last week was just a single file component, and it does all of its own sort of data loading, loads our data here. We do the actual loading from an API class that we created that just can go ahead and call it out, and that's fine, but we'd like to have a way to sort of share that state, because as soon as we introduce routing, we're going to need to share it in a couple of places. And there's a couple of options for this. We could certainly use Vuex. We could use just a simple object. I'm not opposed to either, but I'm actually going to use Vuex in our case. So let's come up here and let's create, or go to our PowerShell console for this. And I'm going to install Vuex, I think is what it's called. Let's find out together. Nope. So let's go back to the browser and let's go to vuex.vue.org. No, .js, no. I think it's .com. Nope. I always get this wrong. It's Vue.js. I think it's .com. Nope, somebody stole that one. Vuejs.org. Let's try that again. Yep. And then in the ecosystem, here's Vuex. And we're probably going to need to refer to this a couple of times because, you know, one of the things I want to kind of dispel in working with this on Twitch is that I know everything about everything. I spend a lot of time in these API documents in order to really get comfortable with what we're doing. And so it is just Vuex. That's interesting. So npmi Vuex. Who would have known that it was the simple name with all these, oh, did not like that. Peer 2 Vuex 362 should be compatible with, let's make sure we're working with, oh, here we go. We were in the wrong Vuex. We're actually using Vuex 4, not 3. It's confusing. Vuex 3 is for 2 and Vuex 4 is for 3. And if we go back to installation, we'll see it's Vuex at next. That's right. Told you it couldn't be that simple as Vuex. Ta-da! Great, we have it installed. Let's go back to the dev task. just so I can leave it down here in case we get some errors. And so let's go ahead and create Vuex. Now there's a couple of different sort of methodologies here. Unlike earlier versions where we had to sort of opt into it, one of the ideas here is that we can just go ahead and create a store and then use that store. We don't need to necessarily bind to it. And so let's first come in here, and you'll see that one of the ideas here is that when we create the store, we're going to want to bind it into the store so we can use it everywhere. So Lucky13 asks another question: where does .NET Core come into play in this project? Let's answer that while we're here. So once we set up the Vue project in this early part of the project, we're going to come in and create an ASP.NET Core 6 project to host it, and then write an API, probably with minimal APIs, just to get comfortable with that, and use, obviously the authentication is going to be in ASP.NET Core as well. So the first few weeks we're going to be all in Vue, and then we're going to bring in ASP.NET after that. So let's go ahead and create a new class. Actually, I'm going to create a new folder in class and call it store, and I'm just going to say index.ts. I'm creating it in its own directory because I'm probably going to want to break it out to a few pieces. Yogam, I'm not sure what you were asking about with the few weeks. We're going to be doing this about an hour a week here at the same time, so it might take a few weeks. And here, let's go ahead and export default, create store, which you'll see it's going to go ahead and get from Vuex for us. And then here we'll have an object syntax. And in our main.cs, well, it will be a few hours, just 1 hour a week for several weeks, Yogam. I don't have the time to do it 8 hours in a row. I'm sorry, but I've got a lot going on. But we'll get there, I promise. So now that we have our store, we can go ahead and just import it. And I'm going to actually see if it'll help me import it by just saying here after the create app, I'm going to say use store. Now where is it going to get this store? It's going to go ahead and get it from, unsurprisingly, just this store class that we just created. And so we have a few different pieces here. We remind ourselves we have state, mutations, and actions. Actions. I was right the first time. So state, we can go ahead and just have a little state here, and I'm going to just start with as simple as possible, and that is to say our let's say book list. It's just going to be an array. And here we can actually go ahead and type it as an array of book, just like we did before. Now this will make it type safe within Vuex, but it's not going to necessarily make it type safe to where we're going to be using it. But let's go ahead and bring this in. And it doesn't know where to get it, so I'll do it for it. If we remember, we had models, books. Did we not rename it to book? It might be work. Yeah. I'm also going to create I think this has to be new array work, right? Yeah. I'm also going to create what I'm just going to call a shelf, which is also going to be an array of work. But in this case, this will be the actual ones that we want to add to our own shelf. And let's go ahead and add some others that we're going to use to show when we're loading and saving. So is busy, I'll start as false, and error, I'll start as an empty string. So these are just some state that we want to share amongst the whole project. We're also going to need mutations, and these are where we change the state, and then actions, where we actually do some operation. And so I'm going to call one load book list in one of these actions. And this is going to be an async. In fact, we're going to get it. We're not going to get it there. An async function. And this is going to get the category, which, like we've done before, is very similar. What doesn't like about this? Because I'm not. Oh. What am I doing wrong with the action? Hold on. Actions. Oh yeah. Async. I want them just as the functions here. And of course it's not going to like async until we do an await, and so we'll just say return and we're going to bring in this book API of just calling this function that I'm going to call book API. Oh, I'm loading it as a default. I don't actually like that. I'm going to have a few things in the book API. So I'm going to say load books and just pass in that category. And let's go ahead and await that. And I'm going to make a change to our book API here. And I'm going to have it actually, instead of return default, return function load books by category. Nothing else really changes except that way we can have a couple of different APIs in there, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that in. Put category here. And let's see what it still doesn't like. It's not assignable to type action. Booklist shelf. It did something weird here. Let's figure it out. So we have our state, mutation, actions. And then that should be the case of, let's go ahead and get the results. If results, then, oh, I know why it doesn't like this. Because we need to go ahead and get the, what's it called again? Make me go back to the docs again. Context. Yeah, we want to get, well, let's start here before dereferencing the context. Because it takes an object first, and then you can add your own parameters here. I always forget this part. That's not going to matter. And from the context, we can say context.commit set book list, and then we're going to pass it in the results. But we're only going to pass them in if they're actually changed, and then we're going to just return. So if the results aren't good coming back from here, we're just not going to set the results. So now we need that mutation of set book list. And this is going to have the same idea where we're going to pass in the state and then any data to it, which in this case will be the results or the list, which we're going to make an array of book. I keep on saying book, I mean work. State dot book list equals list. So I think our state is now in here. And so let's go back to our main view to see if we can get it to work without calling the book API directly. Instead, we're going to import the store. Now, some people, when they're using Vuex, like that Vuex sort of injects it into each view. I like to go ahead and get it manually. Let's go ahead and add that second one. That way I know that it's being sort of handled in the right way. And in this case, all we're going to need to do is say store.dispatch load books. What did I call it? Load book list and the category. This is still going to be asynchronous, but instead of setting these directly, we're not going to have a const book that we store ourselves. We're going to actually have a computed here. Whoops. It's not in colon here. It's computed here. That we just say store.state.booklist. And I don't think I've brought in store yet. Yep. I mean, computed yet, and let's get rid of that. And so now our code is a lot simpler. We don't necessarily know how any of this works. We just know that we want to store the book list and that it is going to get the book list and be able to allow us to show it through the state. So every time we change that state, it should be familiar. And what's important here is that once we add more views, and let's say we wanted to show this book list or the is busy or whatever it is in a couple different places, this allows it to be centralized. So let's see if I've screwed it all up. Let's see if it is still building it. Yep. And if I've done this right, let's refresh the app. Still works. Woohoo! So we've injected view and gotten back exactly to the same place we started, which honestly may not be the best way to entice you to use Vuex, but it's at least a start. And so let's add some of the housekeeping. So I'm going to come to our main view here, and if you remember, we just have this container with bookcase and such, and I'm going to also import the store here. And the reason I'm going to import it is that I'm going to want to go ahead and introduce a setup script. I'm going to want a couple pieces from the store. I'm just going to want to say const is busy equals computed, just like we did before. So exposing the state from the Vuex, we're using computed so that every time it changes, we'll know about it. And so store.state.isBusy. And let's make sure that's imported. Good. And we'll do the same for error equals computed. Store.state.error. And we'll just return them here. We could have also used, I recently did a video that I released yesterday on using the startup script as well, but I still like this sort of, that this is working in the way I want it to. I don't like being too brief. I want to know what I'm doing. And so let's return is busy. Oops. And error. Now why are we doing this? We're doing this so that up here we can go ahead and have, we'll make this prettier later, but for now we'll just have a div that says v-if is busy loading. And maybe we'll make this into a component later, but for now that should be good enough. So when is busy is turned on, we should see this loading. Let's add some prettiness to it. So text large, text yellow, let's make it orange so you can see it a little better. And we're going to do the same thing here for error. In this case, I'm going to make it red. Let's say 500. That might be too pink. No, that's good. And so as we build out different views, we're going to be able to show this on that main page over and over again, that we can use it. But how do we make this actually works? In the view, I'm sorry, in the store, we actually didn't have in here any error handling or anything. So what we're going to want to do here is first add a try and a catch, of course. And we're also going to want to add a finally. And we'll see why in just a minute. Go ahead and format that up. And let's make it a little more concise. And so we're going to try and return this, but we're also going to want an else here that says commit context.commit set error failed to load any books. So that's going to basically allow us to set that. And of course, then we need a couple of these, set error. State. So we can perfectly use these when they're really simple, like I could have done over here. So go ahead and make this a string so it's a little type safe. State.error equals error, right? And you might think, oh, this is a lot of trouble. Let's do the same for is busy. And it is a little trouble, but being able to have that centralized state where you don't have odd side effects, to me, is actually worth it. In the case of is busy, I don't need a state because I'm going to say is busy equals true when we set is busy, and we'll go ahead and add a clear busy, or clear is busy, and set it to false. So we're showing the set error. Before we try any of this, we're going to actually say, in this context, let's go ahead and dereference it, because I'm only going to be using commit here. So I'm just going to destructure it. I keep on saying dereference it. Destructure it here so we don't have to have the context in here anywhere. It just makes our code a little quicker. Commit set error. Now why are we setting the error? We're clearing it in case it was there before, and then we're going to commit set is busy to turn on the busy. And then finally, we're going to turn it off. That way, no matter what happens, we'll get the error, the busy flag showing. And in this case, we'll say commit set error exception thrown while getting books. So it's a little tight here, but we can see we're doing the different things. We're making sure the error is clear, we're setting the busy, and that if we refresh our page, we'll see that I've messed something up, obviously. I'm missing a parenthesis. There we go. And so if we look really quickly right here where my mouse is, you'll see it loading is loading. Let's come back here to our app view, and let's make this 5XL, I think is, let's do 4XL, because I know that one exists, to make it just huge. So did you see it there briefly loading? I hope this is showing up. Obviously, once we're not on localhost, that'll be more obvious. But so we're getting a lot of the basic ideas for what we want in our shared state here, and that's great. Let's come back to, now we've got some of the basics working here. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back to our bookcase and let's add something else. Now, right now, we're only loading science fiction books. And so what we'd like to do is have a list of books in this bookcase and allow us to go ahead and choose what category. Now, we're not getting into adding books yet, but we'll get there. But let's go ahead and say, what is the word I'm looking for? Label for category name, or just say category. Book categories. Right? And then we'll have a select here. ID equals categories. And then let's have some options. Now in our case, we're going to want a name like science fiction, but we're also going to want a value, which is the word that they use in the API for it. So we want something friendly and something that's not friendly. And for now, I'll probably want to load this from some list later. In fact, let's do that. Let's say, nope. Options V for categories, or let's see, C in categories. And the key is going to be category, or just C. And then we can go ahead and say value equals C dot, let's say ID, and then V dot C dot name. So this way, we'll go ahead and set this up, and of course it doesn't know about categories because we don't have categories down here. Now this could be something we keep in the view state, but for now I'm just going to, because this is kind of one-off, I'm going to go ahead and create categories as just a collection of strings. So I'll say, whoops, actually it needs to be an object. Now notice I'm not using ref here because I don't expect these categories to ever change, so I don't need the reactivity. So this is going to be an array of objects, and this array is going to, whoops, it's going to have an ID, science fiction, and a name. Now let's actually put those on the same line so that we can make these a little more brief. And we could read these from some other way, but again, to get us started, this is probably good. Biography, science, technology. And we could go look up more, but having 4, that's good enough. I've worked with the API enough. I know that these are some of them. They're not rocket science, but they should be good enough. And biography. Eventually we'll want to deal with paging on these as well, but we're not quite there yet. So let's return the categories from here as well. I love when it shows there's an error, but it doesn't. Oh, option. That is much better. And here we can use CID finally. Great. And lastly, we'll do at change. And remodel will say current category, which we don't have yet, but on change we'll say load books as a name. Now remember, we already have this function for load that we weren't exposing, but we're going to want it now. Load. And we don't actually need the model at all in this case. We can just say load C. Oh no, we are going to need it. Let me think of how to do this. Yeah, vModel, current category. Let's go ahead and create a ref here for category. Again, these are more pieces that are limited to this, so current category equals ref science fiction. Let's go ahead and expose it down here. And then we should be able to just say that. So as it changes the vModel, see why it doesn't like this. Well, it's not JSX. I hate when I get weird errors that are not at the same thing. So select ID categories, vModel, current category. Let's make sure the double quotes don't matter, but I can't imagine they do. I updated it. Let's see if this actually works. So we have our science fiction here. Let's change the biography. And we can see it's working, right? And you love those really long names. So we've got some of what we want here. Obviously, it's still a bit ugly, but for now we're getting a sense of what we want. And so we'd like to have a way to go ahead and add. Let's look at our punch list. Let's make sure we're still in the same thing. Yeah, set of projects, state management. Yeah, let's go ahead and add our ability to actually add a book to our list. Now, none of this is going to be saved in state or anything. It's just going to be in memory, but it'll be a good start. So over here in the state, if you remember, we have a set book list, and we have our shelf and our book list. Let's create a new mutation here for add book to shelf. Actually, that's what I'm going to call the action. Add to shelf. State book state dot shelf dot push book. So we already have an array here. Oh, so close. And let's go ahead and create another action here. Add book to shelf. And here we'll use the commit again. and go ahead and just say book is a work. And this time it doesn't need to be async because we're not doing anything yet that's async. We can always turn that on later because we're really just saying commit. Add to shelf. Now, because this is kind of empty, I could just actually do the mutation directly from the excuse me, directly from the view, but I'm going to make its own action because eventually we're going to need to save some state there. So I'm actually okay with that. Add to shelf and just pass in that book, right? And so how do we actually make this work? Back over in our bookcase, let's excuse me, I'm going to add another div to our design here, and I'm just going to add a button. I wonder if we have any button classes here. It's fine for now. Button, add to shelf. And I'll go ahead and put a click handler here for add book. And then down here, we'll go ahead and, excuse me, create a function for this. So function add book is a piece of work. And we're going to use the store to commit add book to shelf. And let's include that book. And just to make us feel better, I'm going to go ahead and have another computed here, which is shelf size. And this is just going to be state shelf dot length. And I'm just using this just so we can see if we're actually adding things. I did it again. No, that's right. Oh, I took work out. Let's go ahead and add it back. So we're going to need add and shelf size. Is that what I called it? Yeah, shelf size. And then way up here, I'm just going to put shelf size div just so we can see if all this actually works the way we want to. And it's complaining about missing end tag. Okay, there's, oh, forgot to put another /div. We're down to one viewer. This should be fun, but hopefully you guys can watch this afterwards. So you notice that shelf size isn't showing up, and I wonder why. Shelf size, store.state.shelf.length. Why doesn't it like that? We go back here to shelf. Should have a shelf size of 0, no? Well, let's see if this all worked first. Let's add this to shelf, shelf, shelf. And because we have view here and it's detected, let's go ahead and use the debugging piece for view to see if it actually changed anything. Now, if you haven't used the view tools, these are actually pretty useful because it can allow you to walk through the components and see their state. And it also allows you to look at, where is it? Vuex. There's our root object. Shelf. Evidently, we're not adding it to the shelf when we click these. So we have to figure out what we've done wrong here. So let's come back here and see what happened. So when we say here, add book, we're committing Oh, we're saying commit, and commit is probably throwing an error if we look at the console. Huh. Yeah, bunch of errors. Go back to view. The reason was we don't need commit, we need dispatch. Dispatch is how we're going to add, just like we did here, we're going to call actions. And so let's see what happens now. Refresh it. See, our shelf is still 0. And what did I do? That is weird. Refresh the page. We can see that as we click on these, we're now getting the shelves. And now we can see the shelf is actually adding a bunch. But of course, it's allowing it to add the same book more than once. So before we break up for today, let's go ahead and deal with that as well. So back in Vuex, we're saying go ahead and commit to the shelf. But here in the add to shelf, let's make this a little bit more interesting. And let's say if state.shelf find book, or if it doesn't find it, then we can go ahead and push it. And so logically, this should not allow us to add the same book more than once. So we're back at 0 in here in the shelf. And it's not allowing us to add any of them. Okay. It does not find, or let's do find index. It's greater than -1. Let's see if that's better. Still isn't working. Let's see why. Well, let's see if there's any errors in the console first. Yep. Let's make this really big. Errors in view are a little annoying because you get a lot of them. So it says book isn't a function. Let's refresh this page for a minute. And let's make sure the error is there. Yep. Book is not a function during native. So why does it think book is a function? Oh, because find index, of course. So let's go back to this. I forgot that find takes a arrow function, not. And so b.id equals book.key actually is what it is. And so if we did this right, should be able to add it to the shelf, and we'll see here in view, even though you can see it on the screen, we have the shelf as an array of 1, and if we add it again, it doesn't add it, but it's allowing us to add non-unique books, but not repeating of books. And so we now have shelf actually being stored. So here we have our Brave New World, we have our 1984, etc. So great, we have that. And let's think about the next thing to do. We'll go back to our bookcase. So we have our bookcase mostly created. We could create a couple of components, and so let's actually do that. This idea, we're going to need to have the ability to. Oh, actually, you know what? Instead of doing that, I'm not going to create. I'll create some components next time. Here, let's enable this button by binding it to disabled. Now, disabled is always going to show you an error because it doesn't like it to be a true or false, but this does work in view. It just adds it or makes it go away. Book in collection. Book. So I'm going to create a function here that disabled can check, or actually I think I can do it computed. Well, let's do this. Let's try with the function first. Been a little while since I've done this. Book in collection. Book as a work. And here we're just going to say return state, whoops, store.state dot shelf dot find. Same thing we did before. It'd probably be useful to create an action for this, but it'll be good enough for now. We'll say find b dot id equals book dot, actually it's key. I did it again. ID key. So if the book is already in the collection, or let's change this to book on shelf, just to keep our nomenclature the same. And let's see what it likes or doesn't like. So let's get out of here. Let's refresh the page. And so when we add it to shelf, we'll see that it becomes disabled. So we did that little trick for nothing, but it's probably a good idea to not allow us to add the same book. But here we can go ahead and actually test and disable the buttons based on whether the book has already been added to our huge list of books we've already read. Make sense? Well, I think we're going to break there today, and we'll add paging next time. You can, of course, always, let me switch this over real quick so I can talk to you more face-to-face. You can always get this code in GitHub. Actually, let's go ahead and push it while we're here, just so that I want everything to be seen. So I'm just going to use code to do this, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with this already. Added Vuex and state. So now the latest version is out there on GitHub already. And if we go back to side by side, I'll just do a quick wrap up. We've added Vuex to centralize our view. And for a project this small that we have so far, Vue might seem like a lot more work than it needed to be. We could have used other options as well. I'm not tied into Vue necessarily, but I like to show it for a larger project. And as we get into the different views we're going to be dealing with and paging and other things, I think you'll see that it's going to start to pay off. I love the fact that you can't mutate the state accidentally, and so we don't end up chasing down bugs where one object is changing the object in one place and you don't expect it, and you did an assignment by accident and all of that stuff. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for coming by. I'll be here next Wednesday at 1 as well. I may do another session on Friday at the same time. I'm still working out my schedule for the week, so I might go ahead and add a second day, but follow me on Twitter at Sean Wildermuth, or obviously here on Twitch, and I'll let you know if we have those extra days. So thanks for coming.